Live from the AudioDrome, this is the Illinois Department of Sound podcast. This is markobarloco, joined with perpetually by a partner.
I'm Joe Wallace.
Joe Wallace.
The other half of IDOS.
So exciting. So I was just like thinking, Joe, when I was like moving microphones and getting stuff, like gear, I can hang out with gear, I can do this stuff and it sounds all good. And then today we come down and we start our adventure and I've got not one, but two mysterious hums that I didn't have before.
The perpetual problem.
All your stuff is plugged in and turned on and my stuff is plugged in and turned on. And it's just humming like like a refrigerator.
Studio problems.
And I can't find it. And so I just go, well, it's just going to hum. I'm just going to let it hum.
And that's what this podcast is really all about. This is, we started doing this basically to kind of talk about our journey through improvised music and studio recording and gear and everything else. And it's funny that we come down and we have these studio issues, and then the first thing we do once we get slightly beyond that is to grouse about it on a podcast, which is the musician's journey, I think. I don't know. What do you think?
I do think it is. But it's also like trying to figure out why something is being buggy all of a sudden. And I know that, I don't know. I just don't know. I simultaneously have no expectations whatsoever, but then I want something to just behave. I want it to behave. And sometimes it just doesn't.
And that's one of the things that I personally hope to bring to this whole podcasting journey is the occasional useful, practical advice for people who are in our shoes and maybe have struggled in places that we've already done problem solving or whatever. I will speak for myself alone. I'm not an expert in anything, but I've got my fingers in a lot of musical pies. And so it gives me a broader knowledge base to deal with. And when you're really starting at the bottom of that mountain, that can be kind of intimidating.
Sure. Absolutely. I think, especially, if one is not willing to fuck around and find out.
Exactly.
And so that's just, one of the things that I messed with is not an open detuning, DADGAD, D-A-G-D-A, DADGAD, G-A-D, D-A-D-G-A-D, DADGAD. And there a gazillion people have used it successfully, just, a ton of people. The whole notion of standard tuning came out of an turn of the century industry of sheet music, wanting to sell music that is printed that was then accessible to everyone via standard tuning. Where prior to that push of that printed music industry, tuning was all over the place. And you would teach me a song, Joe, and you'd be like, "Here, tune your fiddle to this."
And my musical shorthand for that is, once upon a time, back before mechanization and motor vehicles, every band was Sonic Youth.
Right.
Because they didn't have standardized tunings.
Right. I have a photo around somewhere of this beautiful, the back of a headstock of oh my God, what's the dude's name? You know the guy.
Les Paul.
Youth. No, what? Yeah, Les Paul. No, the Sonic Youth.
Are you talking about the one named after Mr. Howell, or are you talking about the other one?
Thurston.
Yes.
Thurston. Yes,
Lovey.
The one named
Lovey.
after Mr. Howell, Lovey. And so Thurston, back of the stock of his head on the Stratocaster or Telecaster or some caster, no caster, something, is a beautiful old ancient piece of manila tan, bleached out masking tape with the notated on that masking tape is the string gauge and the subsequent tuning for each one of the strings, and it's all like F sharp, right? And maybe one A or something like that.
Serious John Cage territory.
And I just love that shit. And I think about like that one guitar with that one weird tuning, how that could be for one song in the Sonic Youth world.
And don't lose one or have one stolen, because then you can't do that song in the set anymore.
Right, exactly. Right. I don't know. Or just stick to playing one string, maybe.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate for a second here, because this is an important point. And a lot of people who are new to looping and improvised music and sort of non-traditional approaches to composition might ask, what's the point of tuning even? If it's not a traditionally composed piece, going through verse, chorus, verse, why tune? What? And again, I don't believe you shouldn't tune, but for the person who's beginning this journey, what's the utility there for you?
For me, it's about a shared experience that makes some kind of sonic sense. In that, just today, before Joe and I started the podcast, dear listeners, I said to Joe, give me a letter in the alphabet somewhere between A and G, not D, because D is
my cliche.
Joe's cliche, his default of his dropped D bass. And so Joe said C, and I started my little Rhodes piano simulator on my digital device to give a nice little constant hum and a drone, and that's where we started today. And if I was running C that was tuned C via the 440 vibration, which I believe that 440 is A, I think, right? Isn't that the standard? And in any case, if I am doing that, and I've started our experience inside a proper C note, and if Joe joins in, if Joe joins in, matching that pitch exactly, then what happens is that it's not harmony, but we're in unison, and while the flavor of those two sounds can be remarkably different, Rhodes piano, hummy, fuzzy, and something airy like a wooden flute, some kind of thing. If they're the same, they're the same, and they are in unison, even though they're building on color mixing with different.
It's like painting.
But if he's not the same, if he's not running in tune with that C, then we're going to get that is very popular in French accordion, the tuning called musette, and where while I'm playing a C and Joe is playing a C, we are not in unison, and it's slightly off, and it starts to oscillate. It starts to have a pulse inside there.
There's a real good example of that in the 12 Monkeys soundtrack, when there's this accordion leitmotif that runs through the entire film, and when you hear that, you get that minor dissonance. And it's funny that there's such an immediately accessible example of it, but it's like, if you watch 12 Monkeys and you hear that accordion accompaniment, you're going to hear that little dissonance.
It's a vibration, right? It's in the French musette tuning, I believe there are independent blocks. I think there's sometimes maybe you've got one block that is completely accurate to 440, and then you can have another block up and another block down, I think. And so it's possible, well, it certainly is possible, although I don't know if it's actually done, but it's possible to have two separate off tunings that then disintegrate the drive of the pulse, and it creates a little bit more of cacophony.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's really something.
And on the heels of all that, some people might think that, well, I didn't realize that improvised music was so highbrow that I needed to know so much. And I bring this to the table. I started off musically in the 5th or 6th grade, I can't remember which. And once upon a time, I could read sheet music. But it took me until my senior year of high school to figure out how to do that. I had to play everything by ear, and to me, the sheet music for my instrument represented fingerings. They didn't represent notes. It was like, oh, that's where your finger goes because that's on the bar where the C is. And so, and I'm ashamed to admit that I performed sheet music type music all the way until my senior year of high school and didn't properly know how to read sheet music until that final year. And I've lost all my music theory since then. I mean, I'm doing good to know what drop D is. But right. When you spend an intimate amount of time with your equipment and you know its limitations and you know it inside and out, that gives you the advantage over that lack of technical expertise. And having said that, I have to loop back and say that virtuosity is also highly overrated, because to me there's nothing more exciting than hearing a band like in 1977, before punk was even called punk, and you had these bands kind of fumbling their way through these things that they were making up, and they didn't know what they were doing and we didn't know what they were doing, but we liked how it sounded. And to me, that's sort of the heart and soul of improvised music. I mean, they kicked Glenn Matlock out of the Sex Pistols for quote-unquote liking the Beatles. That's not really why they got rid of him, but he was the best player in the band, and the rest of the band couldn't stand that. And it's like, no, don't get fancy, just attack it. And the bassist didn't want to just attack. He wanted to finesse. And, so there was this clash of, and so many times there's a lot of improvised music outfits where you'll have one person who kind of wants to be that more melodic person. And whether or not the other people are inclined to do that is kind of, down to band dynamics at that point. Yeah. But I think it's fascinating that there's sort of a tautology between theory and virtuosity and beginner's luck and not knowing your gear and making happy accidents and just exploiting the hell out of them.
That sounds good. I was just thinking about how impressed I was as a old boy with the very first time I extracted via careful listening John Entwistle's bass playing inside The Who. And that was, for me, I was like, oh my God, listen to what he is doing in some kind of truly just incredible, beautifully lyrical, just playing in between things and around things, just adding a bit of bottom end madness in such a controlled way. I feel like he was really like even though he was all over the place, I feel like he was like this, the foundation, the bedrock, the mortar that allowed a lot of the other stuff to happen inside The Who. I don't know if that's kind of I guess what I'm saying is that I see him as maybe the guy that could have been kicked out of the band for being so good.
Right.
And I'm glad he wasn't, because I think that he's, he was impressive to me as a old boy.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because the opposite side of that coin for me is Jimmy Page, who was a riff master, but on stage he could be as sloppy as shit, and you would be hearing this going, is this the same guy? But it's like there's an ear for the riff, and then there's an ear for precision, and sometimes the two meet and sometimes they don't. And I get a little bit of that listening to Eno's ambient stuff, because there is sort of here's someone who is pretty much an expert in his field in a certain kind of recording technique and milieu. And so he comes up with these tensions between accidents and very deliberate, calculated things, pretty naturally, and he makes it look easy, but it's not.
Right.
And that's the challenge of improvised music, is to tap into the good parts of Eno while remembering that for every Eno keeper take, there's probably 20 that he shelved.
I suppose. Yeah. I think, yeah.
And here we are.
There we are. So that was a little bit about that immediate my feelings about that. I had to turn off one particular amplifier before we started recording.
Oh, thank you for reminding me, because I wanted to address that specific thing for people who are new to all this. When you encounter that problem, the first thing you should do is analyze your signal path. You want to it's like Occam's razor. It's the most simple explanation possible usually for stuff like that. So it's like, is the chord bad? Is the connector bad? Is there something else broken in that signal path? And do you swap the cable out and it works, or do you swap the cable out and now it sounds half as good as it did last time? Is it crunchy, crackly? There's a lot of things you can do just by examining that path from the instrument to the loudspeaker.
Absolutely. And sometimes you've got your power supply should not run parallel with any cable that is running signal. That you want those a signal, a noise cable, a sound cable to run perpendicular to a power cable if they need to cross paths. You don't want to run them parallel.
And then some people will say, well, why don't you just ignore it and let the volume cover it up? And for me personally, the reason not to do that is there's always, and this is very subjective, but once you hear it, you can never unhear it. There's always a weird bit of discomfort when that's present in the mix that's not there the minute you wipe it out with filtering. And so the reason not cover it up with volume is it's still a little unsettling in a subliminal way. In my personal experience, maybe that's tinfoil hat time, maybe it's not. But for me personally, if that's in there, it feels a little wrong.
Sure.
But it's nothing I can quantify.
Right. And I think generally kind of the single coil 60 cycle hum of a signal producing pickup, I think that is sometimes that in and of itself is kind of it's like a invitation to get going. Like, here's that noise and I'm going to get started. I'm going to lay stuff on top of it. And so that no longer becomes an issue. But I've had smaller amplifiers in my world that have been more noisy than others, and I found them to be too noisy when I was alone. And when I'm alone and just like messing around with stuff, I kind of want, like, when I'm not making noise, to not be making noise. And I don't know, it's just weird. Gear is funny. But what's next, Joe? What do you want to do?
Well, this is our second podcast, so we're still ironing out how things go. But our original intent was that we wanted to talk and we wanted to play. And so instead of just talking about improvised music, we would do a bit of that and then do a bit of the other thing, which is actually getting our sleeves rolled up and doing the thing. And I guess we should do that.
So we'll do a thing for a couple minutes. We'll set a timer.
Yeah.
How long should we do a thing, Joe?
15 minutes.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm going to turn off this microphone.
We are the Illinois Department of Sound, Marco Barloco and Joe Wallace. We are in central Illinois, as our name implies. And that was live from our studio, one of many hours worth of improvised work. How'd you feel about that one?
Oh, I thought it was really good. I think there's something significantly different when we actually play live, thinking that what it is that we're going to do right there in that moment is going to be consumed, even though, there's always chances for major messing with in post-production to make, to do whatever it is that we want to do to make it sound the way we want to make it sound. But when we play with the idea that there is an actual live consumer in our midst, whether it's, it just changes things for me. I don't know what it does. I guess it makes me more careful. Maybe that's it, or more self-conscious, where I try not to be that way.
I feel, from my part of it, and I don't know if this is your experience, but I feel like there's an intense focus that happens when you can't go and do it over.
Sure.
And so it's like performing on stage, but we're not on stage staring at people. We're doing this, in isolation, but live to tape, like Colbert does his show. And it still feels to me, it feels very immediate. And the difference in not having that do-over puts you on your toes a little as an improviser, I think.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
the first thing I had to get used to when I first started improvising music, was that completely open-ended nature of it means you can go anywhere and do anything, but that also means you could drive off the road into the ditch, you could be run over. There's a whole bunch of negatives that you have to deal with in that space, that the first time you encounter them, it just feels like you've made a big fool of yourself and you should never do it again, and the self-loathing starts. And but once you power through that, because that is part of the journey. I would encourage anybody listening to us to know that sort of like personal disappointment is part of your experience, and don't let that put you off.
And I think that, again, I've mentioned this before, I say it all the time, to suspend judgment while you're in the act, while you're doing the thing. You want to just, I don't know, just allow yourself to be there. And, part of what I do, Joe, is I really, really try to listen to you. And I know that's like, I try to listen to you. I try to respond. I try to and that response can be a lot of things. I can search, kind of like what we were talking about before. I can search for that unison. I can search for some kind of harmonic or some kind of dissonance, or just simply trying to find an answer to whatever question that I'm hearing you pose. I think one of the things is that we're both kind of sonically full flavored, and we are, at any given time, we can be doing stuff down in the basement, or we can be screeching up top. And I think that there's a thing where we can both exist in a super, super high register, and we can both exist down below, because that really, because there are no rules. And I think we can find some things there when we both are at the bottoms of our instruments. Stuff can happen.
I feel that one of the formative things for me when I first started doing improvised music, I started very much in a journeyman role, in that I was in bands as like a supporting musician doing improvised music, and I wasn't at first putting myself out there in the middle of the spotlight. So I kind of had the luxury of growing up in public, but being able to hide behind a whole bunch of other people. I was in a group in Texas in the 90s called Crevice, and they were a literal collective, not in terms of like living together, but musically, it was people from all over the scene. We had a couple of saxophone and other wind instrument players. We had a guy who was a looper and he had a double neck guitar, and there was a theremin player. And so I brought, my little setup, a ridiculously over elaborate setup for a supporting musician. I had like 3 keyboards, and it's like, we just need one signal, dude.
Right.
But these are the things you go through, and it helps. It helps to support other people, at least in my case, because I was able to learn how to do that give and take. And the group that I was in was smart enough to put some ground rules down for me, not having done it with them before. It's like their rules were no abrupt sounds, nothing that kind of like elbows its way into the mix. We went gradual changes. All of these things have to kind of unfold instead of sort of slamming into you. And so that was really formative for me. And anybody who's at the beginning of this journey could do a lot worse than finding a group to join and be a supporting member of, instead of kind of putting your face out there all at once. You can ease into this. I guess I took the long way around to say you can ease into this.
Right. That's cool. One of the things that I was making a little departure about, well, I don't know. Here we go. There is a part of what we do that somehow has to do with the divine. And all of those mysterious things, part of being in the moment, doing these things in this collaborative way, is there's many times, both in the moment and in listening to the post-production of our work, where I don't know where I am inside there. I don't know what sounds I'm making. I don't know what is going on. And sometimes I'm really surprised to find myself surface in there. And I'm like, oh, that is me making that sound, whatever that is. And I think of all of our, the things that we hold, the pieces that we touch, the instruments and the various support things that go along with those instruments. For me, they are, because we're talking using words, I want to say what they are, what they can be, and they can be, for me, tools of divination.
Right.
And I wonder about that. I wonder, it's kind of like, well, what is it that I'm trying to, divine, right? Am I looking for water with a dowsing rod, whatever that is. But I think of, the transcendence, like what we're looking. Are we looking for transcendence? I don't even know. Or maybe that's a lot of different efforts talk about as a performer or a player or a participant being in the zone.
Yeah.
And we know when we're in that zone, when it feels like, oh, I finally found it. I'm in a thing. I'm doing a thing. And it made me think about kind of an expanded notion of how do we get there? What is it that we do? What are the tools that we're using to get in that zone, to find those places? And so I was like, I did a little dive and I did a little Wikipedia search about tools of divination, etc., just to give me some more things, some other objects to think about. We in the sense that Joe and I are working on this together. We have our fingertips on the planchette. Is that not the name of the Ouija board?
Yeah.
The pointer for the Ouija board is the planchette. But in my searching, I found the term scrying. which I didn't know what scrying was. And scrying is a lot of times what I do. I close my eyes and I'll be stepping aside and looking inside the back of my eye, looking inside the back of my eyelids, and seeing what it is that comes about. Scrying is gazing into a crystal ball. Scrying is the act of gazing into the crystal ball, to like trying to find what that is, to have a prophecy divulged, or to experience a revelation of some sort. And I don't know, how's that feel for you, Joe?
Well, from the earliest moment that I started doing this, I connected it with Zen because it felt very meditative to hold a note for 3 minutes, or to make these very glacial changes in the song or the soundscape, depending on which way you're going with that. And so when I really started doing improvised music in earnest, I was really studying Zen pretty hard, and so I was finding a lot of similar returns. This is the sort of returns that you're promised if you dedicate to Zen meditation and Zen riddles, koans and things like that. I found the way in very easy for improvised music because when you get used to the idea that instead of a stage, it's more like a swimming pool, that you immerse yourself in, and there are other people, and you want to kind of give them their space, but you want to be part of the group, but you don't want a crowd. There's all these things, and I felt like that experience mirrored my Zen experience. Yeah. But it's also, music there's power. So it's not just meditative. There is a more participatory aspect in it for me. It's like when you hit the zone, it's transcendent in a way that you don't get from other types of creative work. I mean, when I write, I do not enter the zone the way I do when I perform music.
Sure.
That headspace is not available to me as a writer with words on a page the way it is with music. And so, there is something other about it, otherworldly,
right.
Extrasensory, esoteric.
Just recently, I saw, I don't know, I mean, within the past few months, year, there's an event taking place that people are doing during airline travel, where they take their seat and they zone out and they don't do anything. I don't know what that's called.
They call it raw dogging.
Raw dogging, that's right. Which doesn't sound like that's what they're doing. It doesn't sound like they're raw dogging.
No, it certainly doesn't. And having done that not deliberately.
Which, raw dog?
Well,
wait, you mean zone out? I've
gutted out the fight.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Is it just, that seems like a trance. That seems like a thing to do. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't really know what the agenda is.
I always felt it was more aesthetic, like they were punishing themselves. Like you were the guy, the monk with the whip, and instead of a whip, you're riding on the airplane. And airplane travel is horrible. Let's not kid ourselves about this.
It's worse and worse.
Yeah, and
although I wouldn't know.
I have been on every type of motorized vehicle you can name, with the possible exception of a bulldozer. And I'm here to tell you that air travel is the worst way to travel because, at least in a bus, they stop and you get out of the bus for a minute and you walk around and you get back on the bus with all the other people who are riding the bus and you all kind of pretend like you're not taking the bus, but you're in there, and it's like, but the air travel, it's like the shared punishment. And why did I start talking about that?
I'm not sure. I don't know. Like hair.
Oh, raw dogging and zoning out and zen and all that. Yeah.
Raw dogging and zoning out. I think the self-flagellation and hair shirt wearing. I'm not exactly sure if that is beneficial. Although it could be predetermined parameters of some kind of behavior, participation, some kind of thing. And I get that. I just don't know, it seems like, I don't know. I think I'm past forced sleep deprivation for some kind of hallucination outcome.
There's a whole thing called the sleep concert, and it's usually ambient. And I read about this, and basically the performance goes all night, and you're meant to go to this venue with a cot or a sleeping bag and fall asleep to the show.
Right.
Except the only problem with having a sleep concert is the performers don't get any bloody sleep. So it's a sleep concert for you, but not for me.
Right.
I'm not seeing the benefit.
Exactly. Well, I would love to do that. I would love to perform for a sleep concert. That would be really,
it would be amazing.
That would be
fun. Have to go the distance.
Back when Moog was putting on the Moog Fests in Durham, Keep It Dirty Durham, I went to 2 of those Moog Fests, and there were sleep concerts at Moog Fest. I didn't participate because my hotel room was significantly more comfortable.
Now, see, that would be the thing to do. Find a sleep concert and don't book a hotel and travel to the city and do all your city things and then go to the sleep concert.
Exactly, like living on the train in Europe, sleeping on the train and waking up in a different city every night. Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Well, we're coming up on an hour for our podcast here, so it's probably a good time to wind things up and say thank you for listening for a start. And please spread the word if you know someone who wants to begin an improvised music journey, or maybe you're on the journey yourself. Please bookmark us and let other people know we exist, and we will be eternally grateful for that.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and I want to let you all know that this has been Joe Wallace and Marko Barloco, coming to you live on tape from the AudioDrome, Illinois Department of Sound. And you can find us via our YouTube channel, which I am so super proud of, and Tidal and other streaming services.